Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins with a glimpse, brief, eerie, and impossible to forget that a child's face. Seen in the upstairs window of an abandoned house. Eyes wide, expression hollow, and then gone. The villagers swear the place has been empty for years. No footprints, no toys, no sign a child has ever lived there. But Miss Marple knows one thing for certain. Children do not simply appear in windows unless someone wants them to be seen. And in the quiet village of Brenton Hollow, where every cottage hides a whispered past, this single sighting will unravel a truth darker than anyone imagined. Chapter 1. The First Glimpse in the Window. It began on a cold evening in St. Mary Mead. The kind of evening when the wind slid across the village like a whisper and the chimneys breathed out long trails of smoke. Most villagers had already drawn their curtains, locked their doors, and settled into the comfort of their small, warm homes. But for Miss Marple, the hour just before nightfall was the time she liked best for her knitting, her thoughts, and her gentle observations of everything that moved in the village. From her chair near the window, she could see the corner of Old Rowan House, a property long abandoned after its owner passed away several years ago. The house stood gloomy and still, its windows dark, its garden overgrown, and its gate leaning as if it no longer wished to guard anything inside. Children of the village often dared each other to run up to the porch and touch the door, but none did it at night. No one did anything brave near that house at night. It was then, in that fading light, that Miss Marple noticed something. That a curtain in the upper window of Old Rowan House moved. Only a little. Only enough to catch the eye. But it moved. Miss Marple blinked, the soft click of her knitting needles coming to a stop. The window was still again. Nothing stirred. For a moment she thought she might have imagined it. After all, the wind had grown stronger, and old curtains responded quite easily to drafts. She began knitting again. 2 minutes passed. 3. Then, the curtain moved again, this time, more noticeably. Miss Marple leaned forward even before she fully processed what she saw next. A child. A small child, standing at the window. The figure was pale, still, and strangely quiet. A soft shape framed by the broken glass and the faint light from the street lamp. Miss Marple sat frozen, her breath nearly caught in her chest. The child did not move. The child did not wave. The child simply stared outward, down at the quiet street, as if watching something only they could see. What on earth? Miss Marple whispered. Just then, footsteps echoed in the lane, and Mrs. Hartwell, a neighbor hurrying home with her shopping basket, passed in front of Old Rowan House. The child vanished, in a blur. No movement. Just vanished, as if it had never been there. Miss Marple's fingers tightened around her knitting needles. She was not someone prone to wild imagination. She did not believe in ghosts, spirits, or strange visions. Her life had taught her again and again that real people were far more frightening and far more mysterious than anything one invented. But she also knew what she had seen. A child. A very real child. In a house that had been locked up for years. And that meant only one thing. Someone was inside Old Rowan House. Someone who should not have been. The next morning, Miss Marple paid a visit to Inspector Raymond Hale. A polite man with a calm voice but a tendency to dismiss anything he considered village chatter. He offered her tea when she arrived, though he looked puzzled by her urgency. "Miss Marple," he said, "you look troubled. Please sit. What's happened?" She described the child in the window in careful detail, not adding anything more dramatic than what she had truly seen. Inspector Hale listened, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "A child, you say? In Old Rowan House?" He repeated. "Yes," Miss Marple said. "And not a child from the village. I know every family in St. Mary Mead. This child was a stranger. Perhaps someone sneaked inside for shelter. Vagrants do pass through now and then. Vagrants do not bring children with them," she replied gently. "And even if they did, Inspector, the window was on the second floor. The door is nailed shut. The back entrance is locked with a chain. One cannot simply wander in. Inspector Hale sighed. I'll have someone check the house. Do more than check, Miss Marple said softly. Search it. Carefully. He promised he would, and he did. 2 constables went with him that very afternoon. They forced the back door open, climbed the creaking stairs, and examined each room. They found nothing but no footprints in the dust. No signs of recent entry. No food, no clothing, no bedding, no toys. Nothing at all. Old Rowan House, according to official inspection, was as empty as it had always been, but Miss Marple did not accept that. Not even for a moment. That evening, she sat in her usual chair again, her knitting needles moving more quickly than usual. She watched the house, its windows now deep black squares against the dim sky. The wind carried the faint sound of the church bell in the distance. The lane outside was quiet, save for the soft crunch of gravel whenever someone passed by. Miss Marple waited. 9 o'clock. Nothing. 10 o'clock. Still nothing. The stiff motion of her hands slowed. She began to wonder whether the child would appear again, or whether the strange sight would remain as just that, a strange, solitary moment she alone had witnessed. At 10:15. A movement caught her eye, not the curtain. This time it was the light that a faint glow flickered inside Old Rowan House. That it came from the same window. That it wasn't bright like a lamp. It wasn't sharp like a torch. It was a soft light, small, almost like the glow of a candle. And as the glow strengthened, a silhouette formed behind it, the silhouette of a child. Miss Marple's heart thudded. She stood up, steadying her hands on the table. She leaned closer, searching for details. The child's posture was rigid again, shoulders stiff, head slightly tilted, but something was different now. This time, the child was not looking outward. The child was looking down, looking at something held in their hand, something faintly glowing. Miss Marple squinted. She could not see exactly what it was, but she saw enough to feel a cold ripple go across her arms. The child was holding a small lantern, a lantern that cast no normal flame, a lantern that glowed with a strange, pale light. Something pulled Miss Marple out of her trance then, a soft knock at her door. She nearly jumped, then composed herself and answered. It was young Tommy Briggs, breathless and wide-eyed. Miss Marple, he gasped. You should come quick. Mrs. Miller's dog's gone missing, and some folks are saying they saw someone near Old Rowan House earlier today. A child, they said. A real pale one. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Someone else had seen the child. She grabbed her shawl and stepped outside. The night air hit her immediately, sharp, cold, and filled with a tension she could not explain. She followed Tommy down the lane, her heart steady but alert. As they approached the front gate of Old Rowan House, she stopped dead. The curtain in the upper window was open, wide open, and the child was gone. The lantern's glow disappeared as if swallowed by the dark. Miss Marple felt a familiar shift in her mind, the sharp and silent spark that always came before, uncovering something important. Someone was inside the house, someone who hid well, someone who moved quietly, someone who held a lantern that made no sense, someone who knew exactly when to vanish, right when another villager approached. She looked at the house for a long moment, then she whispered, as if speaking to the night itself, "You cannot hide forever, little one." The next morning, the village was full of talk. Mrs. Miller's dog was still missing. A farmer claimed he heard footsteps near the hedge by Old Rowan House. A young girl insisted she saw a face in one of the top windows, small, pale, watching her. Miss Marple collected each story, each detail, tucking it into the quiet order of her thoughts. By the afternoon, she had a picture forming, not complete yet, but clear enough to know that this was not the work of anything supernatural. The child was real. Someone was using the abandoned house. Someone had access. Someone who could enter without breaking a door. Miss Marple knew what that meant. There was a key. Someone in the village had a key. and someone was keeping a secret just after sunset. Miss Marple returned to her window. Her knitting lay forgotten beside her. She did not expect to see the child again so soon. Not until she had more information, and not until she understood what purpose the strange lantern served. But fate had other plans at 10 o'clock sharp. A figure appeared at the gate of Old Rowan House. Not the child, but a grown man, tall, hunched slightly, moving quickly, as if he did not want to be seen. That he carried something in his coat, something that glowed faintly. Miss Marple's breath caught, the same glow as the child's lantern. She leaned forward, focusing all her attention on his hands. The man slipped through the gate, unlocked the side door with careful precision, and entered the house without hesitation. Miss Marple's mind raced. This was no accident. This was no wandering stranger. This was planned, organized, purposeful, and the child, whether real or illusion, was part of a much larger truth. A truth someone wanted to keep hidden. A truth that had now stirred in the heart of St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple stood, put on her coat, and picked up her walking stick. She was not frightened. She was not confused. She was ready, because she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever waited inside Old Rowan House was not a ghost. It was something far more dangerous, something human, and it was time she found out what it was. Chapter 2. The Light Behind the Glass. The next morning arrived with a thick blanket of fog that hung low over St. Mary Mead, softening every outline and muting every sound. It was the kind of fog that seemed to move with intent, drifting around corners and slipping beneath doors. Miss Marple stood by her window as she always did, but this morning her attention was sharper, her thoughts more focused. The events of the night before played through her mind with exact clarity. The child with the pale lantern. The man who entered Old Rowan House with the same strange glow hidden under his coat. The unmistakable certainty that a secret was being tended inside that silent structure. And above all, the knowledge that the child, whether frightened or dangerous, was not alone. Something was happening within those rotting walls. Something carefully hidden. Miss Marple did not need proof to believe in her own eyes. She only needed patterns, behavior, and the quiet truths that people revealed without realizing. And already, those truths were beginning to form a faint outline. That a man who knew the house well enough to enter it with ease. A child who moved silently through the upper rooms. A lantern with a ghostly glow. And a village that was whispering more today than it had in months. Yes, an outline was forming, but outlines are not answers. Answers required proximity, and proximity required bravery. Not the loud, heroic kind, but the quiet, decisive kind that Miss Marple possessed in full. She wrapped her shawl around herself and stepped outside. The fog swallowed her almost instantly, blurring the path to Old Rowan House. The grasses were damp and heavy with dew. Birds were silent. Even the air seemed reluctant to move. Yet there was something else. Something faint. A sound. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Miss Marple followed it slowly, one deliberate step at a time, until she realized it was coming from the house itself, from the upper window where she had seen the child. Her heart tightened. Tap, tap. The sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a stillness thick enough to feel. Miss Marple hesitated only for a moment before approaching the sagging gate of the property. Up close, Old Rowan House looked even more tired than it had from her window. The wooden panels were warped. The roof shingles were curled like dead leaves. The windows were dark, but with a darkness that felt watchful. Her hand rested on the gate. Before she could push it open, footsteps crunched behind her. Miss Marple? She turned, surprised, not frightened, to find Inspector Hale emerging from the fog. He looked uneasy, but also curious. "What brings you out here so early?" he asked. "I might ask you the same." Miss Marple replied gently. He cleared his throat. "Some villagers have been talking about faces in this window and strange lights. I decided to check again, make sure nothing was missed." That is wise of you, she said. Because something was missed. Inspector Hale frowned. Such as, Miss Marple pointed toward the side of the house. Someone used that door last night. A man, tall, moving quickly, careful not to be seen. Hale's expression changed at once, polite disbelief shifting to alert concern. Did you see his face? No, Miss Marple answered. But I saw his hand, and I saw what he carried. A small lantern that glowed the same strange pale light the child held upstairs. She carried a lantern too? Hale asked, startled. Miss Marple nodded. It looked almost unnatural. Battery-powered, perhaps? He suggested. Perhaps, she said, though the doubt in her voice was plain. They turned back toward the house together. Hale drew a deep breath, then nodded. All right, we'll go in. Miss Marple followed him along the side of the building. The fog's weight made every sound louder, their footsteps, their breaths, the soft creak of the house as it settled around them. Hale reached the back entrance and examined the old chain hanging from the door. It was broken, snapped clean. It wasn't like this when we checked yesterday, he whispered. No, Miss Marple said softly. It wasn't. Hale pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned, and a thin cloud of dust drifted into the air. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood, cold stone, and something else beneath it, something faintly metallic. Miss Marple stepped forward. The dust on the floor had been disturbed. Paw prints from a small animal, perhaps Mrs. Miller's missing dog, tracked faintly across the boards, mixed with the footprints of a child, and overlaying them, spaced evenly, was the boot print of a man. Hale followed the prints with his eyes. Looks like someone's been using this place. Yes, Miss Marple murmured. For more than a night, I should think. They moved carefully through the ground floor, checking each room. The living room was empty save for cobwebs. The kitchen was stripped of all but a rusted kettle. The dining room held only a table without legs. Nothing seemed touched, nothing seemed lived in. Yet they both felt the presence of something just beyond sight. A faint sound creaked above them. Footsteps. Hale lifted a hand for silence. Miss Marple did not need telling. They both stared at the ceiling, waiting. Another step, soft, bare, childlike. Then a sharper sound, something metallic rolling across the floor. Hale drew in a breath, then whispered, upstairs. They moved toward the staircase. Every step moaned under their weight. Dust swirled in small clouds with each footfall, catching the little light that filtered through the dirty windows. Halfway up, a shadow moved at the top of the stairs. Miss Marple stopped instantly. Inspector, she whispered, don't rush. But Hale was already gripping the railing, ready to climb faster. Before he could take another step, a soft shape appeared, small, pale, and still. The child, the same child Miss Marple had seen in the window. A girl, barefoot, her hair tangled, her dress old and worn. Her eyes were too wide, too hollow, too fixed on something far beyond them. She held something in her hand. A lantern. The strange pale glow flickered inside it, casting ghostly light across her thin face. Hale drew in a sharp breath. Good Lord. Miss Marple raised a calming hand. Child, she said softly, are you hurt? Do you need help? The girl did not answer. She did not blink. She merely lifted the lantern a little higher, letting its eerie glow spread down the staircase. Then she whispered, barely audible. He said not to speak. He said the house listens. Hale's eyes widened. Who said that? But the girl stepped back, retreating into the upper hallway, her lantern creating odd shadows that stretched and twisted behind her. Miss Marple hurried forward, not fast enough to frighten the child, but quick enough not to lose her. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched into darkness. The lantern's glow drifted toward the last room on the left. The child slipped inside. Miss Marple followed, only to discover something that made her pause. The room was empty, utterly empty. The girl was gone. Hale burst in behind her, panting. Where did she go? Miss Marple stepped forward, lifting a curtain with gentle fingers. Behind it was only a broken window. The fog pressed against the glass like a gray wall. She couldn't have climbed out, Hale said. It's a long drop. No, Miss Marple agreed. Not without help. She examined the floor. Dust patterns, smudged marks, and something else, a faint disturbance near the baseboards. A hidden door. Miss Marple knelt, brushing away the dust to reveal a small latch built seamlessly into the wall. Old, not used in years, but the dust around it was clean. Hale, she whispered. Someone used this. Recently. He crouched beside her. A crawl space. No, something bigger. Together they pulled the latch. The panel shifted with a dull click, revealing a narrow, dark passage that descended behind the walls. The draft swept past them, cold and metallic. Miss Marple straightened slowly. She isn't alone, she said quietly. Someone is hiding her. Someone who knows this house well. Hale's jaw tensed. A relative? A stranger? Miss Marple looked down the dark passage, her voice steady. No, she said. Someone far more desperate. She lifted her walking stick and stepped inside. Come, Inspector. The truth is waiting in the dark. But as they stepped forward, a sound rose from deep within the passage. A low hum. A flicker of light. The familiar glow of the strange lantern. The child's voice drifted through the darkness. He's coming back. Miss Marple stopped. Hale froze. Footsteps echoed from below, slow, heavy, deliberate. Someone was in the passage, someone who knew the tunnels. Someone returning to the girl. Someone carrying that same eerie light. Miss Marple held her breath, and the truth stepped closer. Chapter 3. The Child Who Should Not Be Alone. The footsteps rose through the narrow passage slowly, far too slowly for comfort. Each step was heavy, controlled, and deliberate, as if the man below wanted whoever waited above to know he was coming. Inspector Hale stiffened, one hand gripping the edge of the wall, the other inching toward his pocket where he carried a small torch. Miss Marple, however, did not move. Her stillness had a quiet authority to it, the kind born from years of observing hidden truths and dangerous secrets. She listened carefully, not to the loud steps but to the subtle details around them, the faint drag in the rhythm, the uneven weight, the soft clink of metal brushing against metal. That is not the stride of a confident man, she whispered. Someone is tired, or injured, or both. Hale swallowed. Whoever he is, he's coming closer. We need to fall back. No, Miss Marple said softly. We need to see. The pale glow appeared first, a flicker of the strange light reflecting off the walls of the passage. Then came the shadow, stretched thin by the tight space, bending unnaturally across the floorboards. Finally, the man himself emerged into view. That he was tall, as Miss Marple had seen the night before, but now she could see the details the darkness had hidden. His face was gaunt. His hair was long, untrimmed, falling in uneven strands around hollow eyes. His clothes were dirty, worn, and torn at the sleeves. He looked like someone who had been hiding for far too long. But what caught Miss Marple's attention most was not the man. It was the lantern. That same pale light burned inside it, steady and unnatural, casting an eerie glow across his face. The same lantern the child held upstairs. The man froze at the sight of them. His eyes widened, and he took one step back. No, the man whispered. No more people. I told her not to bring anyone. I told her, we came because of the child. Miss Marple said gently. We want to help her. That made him flinch. He clutched the lantern tighter, his knuckles white around its handle. She's not supposed to be seen, he rasped. Not by anyone. Hale stepped forward, voice firm but cautious. Who is she? And why is she here? The man's eyes darted between them. Something in him seemed to tremble, not with fear of them, but with fear of something else, something deeper. She has nowhere else to go, he whispered. And neither do I. Miss Marple studied him with calm precision. The man was not wild or dangerous in the usual sense. He was frightened, desperate, haunted, and he had been living in the shadows for longer than any person should. Please, Miss Marple said softly, tell us your name. He hesitated, as if the name itself had weight. Edward, he said. Edward Ransley. Miss Marple's memory flickered. The name was familiar, lost somewhere in the old stories of the village's past. You lived here once, she said slowly. Many years ago. Edward nodded, his breath shaky. I grew up in this house. My father was strict. My mother, she was kind. She used to read to me in the room with the big window. That was before she died, before everything changed. Hale frowned. This house has been abandoned for years. Why return now? Why hide? Edward lifted the lantern, letting its pale glow circle around them. Because this is the only place she remembers, he whispered. And then they heard it, a soft, trembling breath coming from behind them. The child stepped into the faint light of the passage, her small form outlined by the strange glow. She clutched the fabric of Edward's coat with fragile fingers. Papa, she whispered. Hale froze. Your daughter. Edward nodded, but his expression twisted with pain. I didn't want her involved. I didn't want her seen. But she insisted on the lantern. She said it made her feel safe. Miss Marple's voice softened further. Safe from what? Edward's eyes grew distant. From the men who are looking for us. From the people who believe I did something I didn't do. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Hale. Tell us, she said firmly. Start at the beginning. Edward sank against the wall, lantern resting beside him. The girl, Luna, he finally whispered her name, curled at his side. I was a repairman, Edward said slowly. Worked at a company in the next town. I discovered something wrong, very wrong. Money missing. Records changed. I reported it. And the next week, they accused me of stealing it myself. My daughter and I, we had to leave. I had no money, no home. Just this place. The only place I knew. His voice cracked. I didn't want her to be cold. I didn't want her to be hungry. So I came back here, even though I wasn't sure it was safe. Miss Marple felt the truth in his words. But there was more beneath it. Another layer he had not yet spoken. What about the lantern? She asked gently. Edward lifted it. It's broken, he said. It's supposed to give white light. But something inside cracked, and now it glows like this. Luna is frightened of the dark, so I let her use it. She likes it. She says it feels warm. Miss Marple knelt near the child. Her eyes were wide, curious, and far too old for her small face. Luna, she whispered, were you the one standing at the window? The girl nodded slowly. I wanted to see the houses. The light made shadows. I like the shadows. And last night, Miss Marple asked, why did you appear again? Luna looked down at her lantern. I saw someone walking outside. A woman. Very still. Very quiet. I wanted to know why she watched the house. Miss Marple's heart softened. Because I was worried for you. Luna's eyes lifted. Nobody's worried for us. Miss Marple felt Hale shift behind her. Even he seemed moved. She rose slowly, facing Edward again. You and your daughter need help, she said. And you must stop hiding. I can speak to the inspector here. We can clear your name if your story is true. But you can't keep Luna in this house any longer. It's cold. It's dark. It's dangerous. Edward looked tormented. If I leave, they'll find me. If you stay, your daughter will suffer, Miss Marple replied. Silence. Then Luna whispered, Papa, I don't like it here anymore. The man broke. His face collapsed into despair, and he covered his eyes with shaking hands. Fine, he said. I'll go. I'll trust you. Miss Marple smiled softly. Good. Very good. Now let's get you both out of this place. They walked through the passage together, the lantern glowing faintly behind them. The fog outside had thinned, allowing pale sunlight to touch the edges of the property. Hale escorted Edward and Luna toward the road where a police car waited. He moved slowly, giving Edward space but staying alert. Miss Marple followed close behind, her eyes on Luna. The child had let go of her father's coat now, a small sign of trust. When she passed Miss Marple, she whispered a single word that made the old woman pause. "Thank you." Miss Marple touched her shoulder gently. "You're safe now, dear." As she watched them drive away, Miss Marple felt the tension in her chest finally release. There had been no ghosts in Old Rowan House. No spirits. No supernatural child. Only people, frightened, lonely, desperate, people who needed to be seen. She stood at the gate long after the car disappeared, the house behind her silent again. But this time, the silence felt clean, empty in the right way, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. She turned back toward her cottage, her steps steady and calm. St. Mary Mead was peaceful again, and Miss Marple, once more, had seen what no one else had. Not a ghost, not a mystery, but a cry for help, and she had answered it. If you enjoyed this dark and atmospheric Miss Marple tale, be sure to subscribe to Haunting Vales, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more chilling stories to life. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep your eyes on the windows. You never know who might be watching.